From rising homicide rates, a jobless rate climbing, and affordability concerns, there's no shortage of topics to address with Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who's in Toronto, and he joins us live today. Thank you so much for joining us in studio. I want to talk about this report yesterday about Canada's homicide rates. You've been talking a lot about crime and safety in our country. We're talking 30-year high for murder rates, but one thing that really stood out was the number of youth that are accused of murder, up to 90, I believe, from 33 last year. What do you make of those numbers, and what would you do differently as Prime Minister to make sure those numbers are going in the opposite direction?
Well, after 8 years of Trudeau, we have crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder. Shooting deaths are up over 100%. Violent crimes up 40%. The number of kids accused of murder is up 200%. This is the obvious consequence of the catch and release Trudeau criminal justice system, which allows the same repeat violent offenders to be released, often within hours of arrest, on early bail or later on parole. So my common sense plan is to make repeat violent offenders ineligible for bail or parole. It'll be jail, not bail, jail, not bail for repeat violent offenders. We will invest in treatment, not giving out decriminalized and subsidized drugs to bring our loved ones home drug-free, and we'll stop harassing law-abiding hunters and licensed sport shooters and instead put the money into bolstering our border to keep illegal guns out.
I want to shift the topic to Canada's finances, unemployment, which is now ticked up to 5.8%. We're dealing with an affordability crisis, food insecurity. More people are visiting food banks. How do you address all of this? I mean, these are mounting issues that are affecting so many people. It doesn't seem like there's one quick fix to this issue.
No, unfortunately, it took Justin Trudeau 8 years to cause this problem. He has brought in a carbon tax, which drives up the cost of our farmers and truckers that bring us our food. His inflationary spending, which has doubled the debt, has caused housing and other prices to rise at the fastest level in 40 years. And now, of course, everyone's being hit with the interest rate hikes he promised would never happen. So my common sense plan to bring home lower prices is to axe the carbon tax. That'll bring down heat, gas, and grocery bills. We'll cap spending and cut waste to balance the budget so that we can bring down interest rates and inflation. We'll lower income tax so that hard work pays off again. You bring home more of each dollar you earn. And we'll clear away the bureaucracy to build affordable homes.
Touching on carbon tax, one of the things that made some headlines was the Liberals accusing the Conservatives of shooting down support for Ukraine. And I was wondering if you can just kind of give our viewers a little bit more clarity about the Conservatives' position on that and why the carbon tax was a part of that decision. Can you just offer some clarity to that?
It shouldn't have been. We already had a free trade agreement with Ukraine, which Conservatives negotiated. We support free trade with Ukraine. Trudeau amended the free trade agreement to add a carbon tax that it requires both Ukraine and Canada promote carbon taxes at home and around the world. That's, of course, horrible for both Ukraine, which will have to rebuild from a war, and it's terrible for Canada because, as you just mentioned, we have a record-smashing 2 million people going to a food bank. Canadians can't afford to eat, heat, and house themselves. So it would have been hypocritical for me when my lead plan is to axe the tax to then vote for an amendment to a trade agreement to add a carbon tax. So, if this bill doesn't pass, nothing will happen because we already have a free trade agreement. So we support a free trade agreement with Ukraine that does not include a carbon tax. It's common sense.
I want to touch upon what's happening overseas. We're dealing with a horrific conflict in the Middle East, but in part of that, we're seeing rising levels of Islamophobia, rising levels of anti-Semitism, and these communities are feeling this heavily. And I'm wondering, what's your message to the Muslim community, the Jewish community, who are dealing with exceptional levels of hate, racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia? What's your message to the communities that are being impacted by this hate?
That we stand with them. We Canadians should continue to be a welcoming people. We should remember that the conflicts overseas should never spill over into violence here at home. This should be a country where it doesn't matter if your name is Smith or Steinberg, Martin or Mohammed, Poilievre or Patel. As long as you work hard and follow the law, you should be able to enjoy peace, freedom of worship, and an opportunity to earn a good life. So common sense Conservatives have a plan to bring home safety by banning the IRGC terrorist group, that Iran sponsors and which terrorizes both Persians and Jews in Canada, to bolster support for places of worship to protect themselves against violence and to cut the red tape in getting those supports, and to make sure we share intelligence from CSIS to local police to interrupt terrorist attacks against mosques or synagogues or any other place.
Mr. Poilievre, I wish we had more time, but that's all the time we have for now. But I appreciate you stopping by. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.